the samurai is not necessary anymore.
Necessary? What could be more necessary?
Really? A fellow linguist? Oh, capital. No disrespect intended, sir, but shove it up your ass. We may have at last found some small measure of peace that we all seek, and few of us ever find.
Good evening, my name is Haru. Welcome to Jare to Jared. On this week's episode, the Jareds will discuss Edward Zwick's The Last Samurai, Shedding Your Cocoon, The Playbook to Happiness, Tom Christ, and much, much more. Time to get started.
Crazy shit, man. Like they'd have people come in, and I said it in the pod, but she'd the way he writes it, you can't tell like how much of it was real and how much was like simulation, but they would do these like surgeries, quote unquote surgeries, where she's like literally pretending to like cut people's organs out and replacing it with animal organs and like splashing blood in their face and shit like that. It just sounds
nice.
so weird, bro.
So crazy.
Yeah.
I was listening to the Y-Files episode on Aleister Crowley.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know he had one on. Old Aleister.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
Also a madman, you know.
That guy was fucking crazy too, huh?
But, you know, was definitely like an extreme low tech, was fighting against the like organized religious American morality, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Through the ridiculous and the insane.
Yeah. Yeah, which is cool, man. It's like, you know, I wonder, okay, take these figures like Aleister Crowley, Jodorowsky, these you know, really intense kind of actors, you know. Do you think that's what the world needs right now, is these like totally in your face, over the top experimental artists and stuff like that? Is that what the world needs right now, or is that like too much? We actually just need we don't need someone who's breaking the system. We need things to like calm down. Like, does the world need an Aleister Crowley, you know?
I think, oh man, that's a hard question, because I just watched Watchmen, the movie recently, you know, and was right at the end to, you know, cause the crazy public disaster to you know, killing millions but saving billions, as he puts it.
Yeah.
You know, him and Dr. Manhattan there at the end is, and then at the end of the movie, you know, of course, it varies much from the comic book, but at the end of the movie, Rorschach's trying to leave, because he says, like, he tells, I can't remember what the other character is. He's like, the difference between me and you is if it's them, or if it's this or the apocalypse, you'll freaking compromise, and I'll never do that, you know?
Yeah.
So he walks away, and he's like, wants to go tell the world, like, this guy killed millions of people to like fake this war so Russia and America could come together. And Dr. Manhattan fucking kills him, you know, explodes him, because do we need Aleister Crowley? Did the world need a Rorschach, you know?
Right.
Do we need a Rollins in this world?
Or the True Detective guy, Matthew McConaughey, True Detective, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I mean, I think the whole purpose of guys like Aleister Crowley, Alejandro Jodorowsky, these Rorschach guys, whatever you want to call them, freaking Voights, whatever. I think their whole thing was like shocking people into awareness, right? You know, doing these like weird, fucked up performance art things, Satanism, playing around with like Satanism and dark magic and shit. They're like trying to like shock people into awareness, right? Which sometimes you need, right? Because I mean, especially, or Genesis Peorage, you know, like coming out of this background of what was essentially still this like Victorian kind of England, you know, where it was like hyper censored, you know, extremely stuffy, a lot of rules and regulation, cultural rules and regulations. Then you needed these figures to come in and begin to break that down, you know? But do we need that today? Honestly, I think the world's like broke down enough, you know? I think like figures like that, their whole point, their
I
whole
like that.
point of coming in was being like, look, there is no grand narrative, there is no like linear history. You know, culture is itself a kind of cult, it's mind control, it's all of these things. And they came in to point that out. Whereas now like we know that, you know, I mean, reality is so fucking slippery. If anything, that's what's destroying us right now. The fact that we don't have a firm sense of linear reality that we can all agree upon. You know, there's no consensus reality. So Crowley, people like that, they broke down consensus reality. I think that was needed at the time. Now it's broken down. It's so broken down that people are losing their fucking minds, right? So if anything, I think we need people to like rebuild consensus reality. We need like healthy men and women, adults to come in and rebuild consensus reality, but a healthier one than it was.
Right. That's interesting. I didn't think you'd respond that way. I really didn't.
Really? How'd you think I was going to respond?
I thought you were gonna be like, yeah, man, Zion, let's fucking
Yeah,
kill
break it down, bro. No.
No, I'm kind of with you, but I will say, I think that we have come into a conservatorium in our contemporary age, both on the conservative and the liberal sides.
What do you mean a
And
conservatorium?
Nobody has freedom of speech on either side. There's a lot of, don't do this, don't say that, don't do that, or on either side,
Yeah.
books getting freaking canceled and burned and banned, and on that side, and then people getting canceled and burned on Twitter and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we do need an Aleister to just kind of really go against this whole, tech wave, political wave, red wave, blue wave sort of mentality that the contemporary age has put it on, because really that's what happens every time there's like an enlightenment period, or like, after the World War II generation, there was like the swing and fucking, rise of like jazz music, blues music, fucking, people were out there swing dancing literally for, I don't know.
Right.
I'm just saying that it seems like we live in a, like, people aren't having sex. This is the lowest rates of like, relationships, fucking all this stuff, I think that something's gonna snap, and it might not be this generation, but it will be the next, I think.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like, I was watching a video of this psychologist on have you ever heard of the soft white underbelly? It's a YouTube channel.
No.
It's really good. You would like it. This dude goes around and interviews like pretty much everyone. He interviews like crackheads off the street, but to really ask like, how'd you get here? Like, what's up with this? Like, what was your life story that brought you here? Really deep conversations with like a whole range of people that you wouldn't necessarily interview. The literal soft white underbelly of America. But then he's also interviewing writers, psychologists, people like that. So I watched one with this psychologist, Dr. I forgot her name, Sadia something or other. But she was talking about the whole like she does like sex psychology, relationship psychology, and she's like, we're fucked, man. Our society's it's lost, it's over, we're so fucked up. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. What was her hypothesis on it?
She was getting into like a whole bunch of different things. Well, it's interesting because she works as a psychologist, a therapist in Dubai, which has like the highest rate of like millionaire and billionaires in the entire world or something like that. It's all these like global high financiers, So
Right.
she works with these guys who are making fucking billions of dollars, right? And then these guys will like make their billions, have like a whole fleet of Lamborghini, shit like that, just so that they can then get these like women who look like models and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And then when the guys, of course, get cheated on or whatever else, they come to her and they're like, their whole worldview is like devastated, you know?
Right.
So then their question is, well, I had $1 billion and it wasn't enough. She still, you know, it wasn't, she
Right.
didn't
Right.
like me, you know? And then she comes in and is just like, well, dude, because that's only like, you know, there's so much more to relationship than just like
Right. Right.
materialism, you
It's a
know?
small part of the problem. Right.
Yeah, so that was a big part of what she was talking about, where like a lot of men think that like material comfort is like the singular thing. And she goes, you know, it's a big part of it. I mean, she, according
Right.
to her, this is her words, like women were evolutionarily bred to like um seek for a sense of safety in the men that they're with, right?
Right. Right.
That's her argument. Um and she says like, yeah, so that's there, but then men interpret that as like it's just job, it's just material well-being, it's just money. And she's like, well, no, because safety is defined by more than just your material status.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so it was a good conversation. You know, it was essentially just like, here's what men think women want, here's what women actually want, here's, you know, the ways in which like porn, she talked about porn a lot and how that's like fucking destroying the fabric of society.
Right. Right.
Not in this like hyper moralistic way, but in like a, no, if you look at the actual statistics and what it does to the psyche, she's like, it's not good, it's not a healthy thing, you know.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't affect just men, right? Because both genders are engaging in this new toxic culture. It's not like all the porn is a bunch of dudes by themselves, you know.
Right, right.
Like it's, and the rise of OnlyFans, all this stuff, it's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
toxic just for
yeah.
everybody, all genders, all around. And then we're in this new society where, you know, a lot of the girls, even on Tinder and stuff, I've seen the profiles, you know, they mention it. It's about money. You better have this and that. And it's just like, and girls I've dated in the town and stuff, you know, it's extremely important to everyone I've met, you know. So like, and like sometimes girls go to the other extreme, you know, and be like, oh, well, I'm gonna date like the vagabond from the street because he's a good guy or whatever. Turns out that dude's a fucking mooch, you know, loser, just like is actually a really bad guy and lazy and doesn't ever want to get a job and is like,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? So there's some sort of like disconnect. There's a discord there
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I think people are focusing on these stupid symbols out there, wealth,
Mm.
no wealth, being about, you know, what sort of stereotype am I trying to find to fall in love with? Stop that, right? We got to find people that are focusing on themselves, growing, you know,
Yes.
being the
Yeah.
work of art. That's what's attractive to me now, anyways.
Totally. And that's what the psychologist got into, where she was saying like, she was like, yeah, our standards have gotten so backwards based on social media. And this is true for relationships, true for economics, true for job status, all these different things, where it used to be you're comparing yourself to your neighbors, right?
Right.
And your neighbors were probably also these middle class people who were like doing all right, you know, whatever, they're fine. And like, that's who you're comparing yourself to. You know, they have like one car and you have one car and, you know, one TV in the house, whatever, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right.
And then she goes, now we're with reality TV, with social media, we're quite literally keeping up with the Kardashians, in the sense that we're no longer comparing ourselves to the Joneses. We're comparing ourselves to the Kardashians, you know?
Right. Right.
So then, which we're not doing on purpose, our brains just do it. So then it's like all of these dudes who are like, you know, average looking guys, normal guys, you know, middle class dudes, decent jobs, whatever, but, you know, they're not freaking living in Dubai, high financier or whatever. In their heads, because they're absorbing all this shit, you know, social media stuff, pornography, in their heads, they're supposed to be they're supposed to have a Lamborghini and be driving around with freaking, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson or something, right? So
Right.
then, they like, you know, have these ridiculously high standards that just like cannot be met. So then they're not entering into a relationship from a place of like healthy expectation. And even if they get lucky, you know, normal, very average guy like ends up with this like hyper beautiful woman or whatever, it ends up being there's like an imbalance there where he ends up becoming this like I don't know if I'm using this word right. You know what a simp is?
Yeah. Yeah.
My students would say that shit all the time, and I was like, I'm not sure I totally get what that word is, but I'm gonna use it anyway.
It's
But the
pretty.
dude,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
is it bad? I don't know.
No, it's pretty like clear. I was like, well, I don't know what there's
I
not
don't
to
know.
get, but still, though, yes.
Yeah, I
yes.
don't know, man. I don't know.
It's
Whatever.
fine. It's fine. You're
But anyway, the dude's just
millennial.
being a
Yeah.
bitch. You know, he's just like begging. He's desperate. All these
Exactly.
things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Is that what a simp is?
Pretty much. Yeah. And
Okay.
like a dude who's in a like pretty abusive relationship who's still like, oh, that's okay. I love you.
Oh, so okay. So
Oh,
I
yeah,
was using
yeah.
the word perfectly. Yeah, dude's
Yeah,
a simp.
perfectly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I was laughing.
Ah,
I
all
was
right.
like, you got it. You got it. You got it.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I live
You're
in a
hip.
liberal
You're cool.
monastery. But I'm hip. I'm cool. But yeah, so these dudes become fucking simps and then get taken advantage of and
Right.
blah
Right.
blah.
Right.
So
Right. And not to beat the same drum over and over again, but yet again the detriments of online dating, because all
Yeah.
you get are these categories, right? I have this, I have that, or this is a joke,
Right.
look at this picture of
Yeah.
that, my Jeep, this, or
right.
or I have no car, I ride my bicycle all the time. Just like, all this shit is fake until you actually meet the human being. That's why boots on the ground is the best, I say.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
and then you allow the people that you like to be whoever they want to be. You know what I mean? You're not like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to date a lawyer or fucking musician or whatever,
Right.
So-
Yeah. We all have these like crazy stereotypes in our heads of what we should be, what our social groups should be, all these things,
Right.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it's sad that we have these things now, like the simp and the incel,
Yes.
and fuck,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Oh man, no wonder we're jumping off the Taos Gorge. It's
Bro, yeah.
devastating. We
Rebuild the village.
we gotta we gotta have a goal as men, and we have to have right. We gotta have an intention. We need to find the village and
Right.
fucking put on our suit of armor again.
Exactly. And this leads us directly to our movie for the day.
Saké!
Sake! Sake!
I killed you. Nah.
So
Saké.
good.
So good. Yeah.
The Last Samurai starring Tom Cruise.
So good.
Yeah.
I introduced the last one, They Live. I'll
right, so I'm doing it.
lend you the floor. I'll lend you the floor.
All right. I think I just did it. Whatever. Well, I don't want to do it. Now I'm nervous. I don't want to do the voice.
All
right, we're doing The Last
we
Samurai,
already
Tom
did
Cruise.
it. Last Samurai. Yeah. For anybody who hasn't seen it, give us a quick synopsis.
Okay, cool. So The Last Samurai is essentially Dances with Wolves, but with Japanese people.
Exactly. Yeah.
The end.
And it's
That's
also exactly
Avatar.
Avatar. It's also exactly Dances with Wolves. What's the other one? Last of the Mohicans.
Last of the Mohicans, Avatar, Dances with Wolves, fucking Pocahontas.
Right.
All right, pretty much Last Samurai, which is to say all of these movies, is about some really suave, good-looking white dude who gets disenchanted with, white American culture and then leaves that culture to go join up with a marginalized group of people, an exoticized group of people, Japanese, Native American, aliens and Avatar, just the other group of people. And through doing that, actually ends up coming in contact with these more wholesome humanistic values and ways of being. Of course, there's a girl. He ends up marrying some girl from the village,
Right.
Yeah, which is big. I mean, that's such a trope in American movies,
Yeah.
Even Deliverance, because their whole thing was like returning to nature.
Well,
They didn't do the join the tribe, but they did return to nature,
Right, right. Even Johnny Mnemonic is one of those stories. He
Yeah.
he meets the low techs and he ends up switching
Yes.
over, you know.
Yeah. So here's a question actually for you. I've been dying to ask you this question. So in the final battle, you have Tom Cruise and he's all samurai'd out, right? He's wearing the freaking armor and stuff. You know, he's got his like best friends who are all these like Japanese guys now, you know. And they're going out to have the parley before the battle starts. They're going to go talk with the Americans who are leading, you know, this kind of like private army essentially trying to um you know, bring capitalism and civilization, quote unquote, to Japan, right? So he goes out and then he sees his friend that he used to fight with, that Tom Cruise used to fight with as a Union soldier, right? And the friend says to him, sees Tom Cruise in all this armor, and the like white supremacist friend says like just tell me one thing. Why do you hate your own people so much? You know? And then Tom Cruise is just like, you won't understand, you know, and then they go and fight for honor and all this stuff, right? But essentially, I mean, the way the question's presented, it's like this white supremacist being like, why do you hate your own people? What the fuck's wrong with you? You know, trying to urge him back towards white supremacy, essentially. But there's actually a validity to the question, because if there's this many movies that carry out this trope, why is this such an American fantasy? Why does America kind of hate itself enough that it's constantly fantasizing about leaving itself to go join another culture, to go join another world, another village and group of people? Why does Tom Cruise hate his culture so much, you know?
Well, what he hates is the genocide of the culture.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what American culture is mixing with other cultures and then evolving from out of, you know, the racist stereotypical, you know, immorality that's going down, you know.
Yeah.
So just a few initial thoughts before we get into it fully
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
had. I fully agree. Great reading of the movie. The initial, you know, it. I just want a couple disclaimers. You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's on the outside. This movie is fucking deep, so deep. All of them, they're all really good.
They are good
Last
movies. Yeah.
Samurai is my favorite of these narratives. And listen, if you think narratives, oh, this narrative gets repeated, listener, you know, whatever. I don't want to. Well, listen, all narratives do the hero's journey, everything,
Sure.
right? So it's a cool little style of way to write. I think Last Samurai is the best of all of them. Like, movie's amazing. Freaking Saké. Returning to the village, you know, when you really look deeper into the movie, man, it's political, it's spiritual, it's psychological, it's about love, it's about so many different things. It's about becoming sober, freaking millennial, returning to the village, freaking it's basically Jared to Jared, you know, the last Jared to Jared samurai, you know. But yeah, let's get into it. I think all of those things that you said were true. And yes, I'm just gonna throw it out there. The only really criticism I have is he has to live with the like wife that of the husband he killed. And
Oh, that was kind of
also
funny.
the
It's just
ending,
like,
I
in
wish
what
he
world
would
would
have
that happen in?
died in the field and then, you know, maybe had Hagrid, you know, Mr. Grid write about you know, what happened to him. I don't know. We'll see. I hope he returned to the village, you know. Uh and then when he says I'll happily take my life. I don't know about that. I don't know. You know, he's still Captain Algren down there, but in any event, that being said, I think it's a beautiful movie. I've seen that movie so many times. I love it. You're getting the scenes a little mixed up. He says that comment about what do you hate about your own people so much is when he's like drinking and debating going back to America, like before
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
he saves Katsumoto.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Yeah.
But he doesn't necessarily answer him, you know, but the narrative is telling us what he hates is the commerce of war, right?
Yeah.
The military industrial complex, freak.
Right.
You know, you name it. It was corrupt back then. But when was this movie made? You know, it's also telling us something about the post 9/11 America too. So
What year did it come out? Did you look that up?
look that up, Prince
Jamie.
Hakeem. Let's see. I can do a little edit here. Last Samurai was made in 2003.
Nice. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, because that's literally the same year that we went to Iraq, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. Maybe we're trying to say something there, you know, before America's longest war, you know. So
Right. Yeah, because it is interesting, you know, because one, there is like the criticism of these movies where it's like, okay, you know, it's still like male centric, white centric, blah, 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 all these things, right? You know, but then there's also like, I mean, the movie is speaking out against genocide, right? I mean, that's the whole thing is that Tom Cruise's character, he's a veteran who was essentially participating in the massacre of native tribes, right? I mean, he fought with Custer's army and shit, you know?
Yeah.
And then is, like you said, just totally disillusioned. He's upset. He's freaking drinking away his sorrows. He's got PTSD from that experience. And you could see the rhetoric around him is one of like, you know, everyone's so interested, like, whoa, you fought the natives. Like, what was that like? We heard they're the bravest people, all this stuff, right? And then he's having his flashbacks where he's recalling just massacring women and children.
Right.
Which is what happened. Like, dude, when I was living in Denver, I went to this museum, the history museum, and they talked about the
wars, you know.
Yeah, it was like I think it was the Sand Creek massacre, and it was I mean, I looked it up. There's been a massacre, a Native American massacre in every single state. There was one in a town down the road from the town I grew up in. Like, you know, I didn't know about it. They didn't fucking teach us that, right? But it's like crazy, dude. If you look them up, there's literally hundreds of these massacres where like the men were out like hunting or something, and then all of these American soldiers just like rolled in. And it was a party. They like were getting drunk and just like shooting at women and children and old people who were like sleeping in their teepees and longhouses, like fucking crazy, horrible stuff, right? So that's the flashbacks that Tom Cruise is having. So you're seeing this, you know, the contradictions between the narrative that's being built of these brave American soldiers and then the reality of the flashbacks that he's having, you know?
Right.
So it's also a very honest movie too, you know? In that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it would be nearsighted to see that movie as just like, oh, it's just another white hegemon star male dude, you know, whatever, Tom Cruise. Listen, Tom Christ.
Tom Cruise. He looks great in that freaking
Thomas Christ,
uniform,
Thomas H. Christ in that movie. So the reason we're calling him Tom Christ, let's get into some of the themes.
Yeah, sure.
So at the beginning of the movie, and if you like Isaac Asimov or know Foundations, look this up, but read the book or watch the show. There's these characters, Brother Dawn, Brother Day, and Brother Dusk, and they essentially represent the younger version of our lives, our middle age, and our later part of our lives. So when Last Samurai starts, he's very much Brother Dawn. You know, he's at the Winchester thing. He's drunk. He's the freaking millennial alcoholic. He's, you know, he's down and out. He's having PTSD flashbacks and everything, you know, and he ends up getting this job with the people that he hates, PTSD, which is even worse. And it brings him to Japan. So that's but once he gets captured by the village, by Katsumoto, and they resist him, his Saké, um it, that act in the story that begins act 2 that he turns into Brother Day. It's actually a pretty beautiful transition there.
Right, right. Yeah.
And when he comes out, it's sunny outside, it's the village, he's joking, he's freaking, and essentially what happened is he was reborn, just like Jesus. He freaking sacrificed and died and was rebirthed to the village,
Why do we why do we love stories of transformation?
Because we always want to be better.
Yeah.
We always want to feel better. We always want to live longer, and I think transformation means you're shedding something toxic about yourself and transforming into something better. Because why would we want to transform into something bad,
Yeah. Yeah. See, and that's what's interesting too, because even though Tom Cruise, okay, he sheds the American culture, the American hegemonic culture, right? Sheds that and then is rebirthed in the Japanese samurai culture. And I think part of why we like stories of transformation, kind of like you're saying, is because that transformation takes us toward our more authentic selves, So even though in these stories, Tom Cruise, he's adopting a different culture. Avatar, he's adopting a different culture. Dance with Wolves, different culture. Through that rebirth process, they're actually coming in contact with something more authentic to who they actually are. Because Tom Cruise freaking PTSD'd out, massacring people on the plains. That wasn't that character's true self. I mean, that character is a very sensitive character, right? He's like writing in his journal, he's doing sketches, all these things. And then in the Japanese culture, he's able to express himself as he more authentically is.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Going back to the authentic self, to the Tom Cruise before he was a soldier and had to commit all those atrocities, before the PTSD,
Yeah.
And that's also why stories of negative transformation are so interesting to watch too, because they're dramatic, they're devastating, they're,
Yeah.
And that happens as well. That's essentially the Joker,
Yeah. One thing I came across, and I forgot what, one of these like ancient Chinese masters or whatever. Everyone always refers to the ego, your ego mind, your personality structure, and it's through shedding that that you become your authentic self. So this ancient Chinese master, forgot his name, he refers to that part of yourself, the like ego mind, as the cocoon. So your ego is your cocoon, and he goes, you need to shed that cocoon in order to then, become who you actually are. And I mean, that's really the story of The Last Samurai. He's shedding the cocoon of alcoholism, the cocoon of trauma, the cocoon of indoctrination in an imperialist society, right?
Right. And then
in order to become who he truly is, which is a village man.
Right. A villager. And the freaking the dragon butterfly with his armor and back to having a family.
Yes, yeah.
Farming, being a gatherer, not, a hunter of men anymore.
Right. Bro, you know what too? Oh, you froze. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. It's tastefully done. The relationship with him and the Japanese wife and kids and stuff, it's very tastefully done, man. I mean, like, not sound like an old dude or something, but like Game of Thrones, if this was like, Game of Thrones era TV series, like he'd be like naked with that chick in like freaking 25 seconds, But the way it's done in the movie, it's like this like very slow, careful courting process. And then they like share one kiss at the end before he goes into battle when she's like dressing
Right,
him in his like
right.
silk robes to violin music.
No, man, the power of that scene, you know. And that's another thing we've lost in our culture too is the slow robe scene, you know. All I want is somebody to slowly dress me in my robe, you know. I'll buy a robe. I don't have one. I'll get a kimono. But no, like immediately we're like, cool, Tinder, meetup, coffee, like, oh,
Right.
I don't like hook up on the first date, and then
The
like,
courting process, bro.
okay, I'll hit you up later, and then she hits you up later that night. It's like, okay, second date, let's freaking round freaking pound town, just like, and then you don't know each other. It's you know,
It's the
and
courting process, bro.
God bless them, but you know, the courting process of the village is,
Yeah.
you know, man, just sake, not in my house, you know.
Dude, that's
Freaking.
just so funny. The scene, so fucking just to let the audience know, there's a scene, if you haven't seen the movie recently, Tom Cruise, he like, you know, he gets stabbed in the first battle or something, right? So then he's like taken prisoner essentially by the samurai, and he's like healing in the house of the sister of the chief samurai. And he's going through these like alcoholic tremors and shit, healing from his wounds, and he's just screaming, "Sake! Sake!"
So good. That's so good.
Yeah, my favorite scene in the whole movie.
Yeah, and that, you know, man, I can't remember what her name is in the movie, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Listen, I think she has a lot of agency in the movie too. I
Yeah,
feel
she's a
like
good character.
she
Yeah.
has more agency than you know in Killers of the Flowers Moon for sure. Because she like
I could see that actually. Yeah,
she's like, get this dude out of here. I'm gonna freaking let me kill myself. You know, she wasn't
yeah.
down. Like it took forever. And listen, taking forever when you have TC Tom Christ in your house, that's a tall order, you know. So she had agency, you know, but eventually
yeah.
those walls are cracked. He proved himself. So
He did.
especially once he became Brother Dusk. At
Yeah.
the end of the movies, Brother Dusk, he puts the armor on. He's fully evolved from his previous trauma, and now he is 100% a Galactic Observer, a samurai. You know,
Yeah,
the last samurai village.
Yeah,
And
totally.
we're all trying to get back there. We're trying to protect it. You know.
See, and that's to bring the conversation back to where we started, which was, do we need figures like Aleister Crowley, you know, all
Okay.
these guys like that? And I was like, well, we did, but I don't think we do now. You know, I think what we need
Right.
is like, what we need is we need fucking Tom Christ.
Right.
You know, we need the last samurai kind of man to like come in and help rebuild the village. That's it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
probably say it
Listen,
every episode, but that's it. You know.
Side note: if Scientology is right,
It is.
we're looking forward to a good future, man. Tom Cruise is going to be the fucking the captain of the Sea Voyager ship. So
Yeah, that'd be
for
cool.
the rest of time, I trust him. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, trustworthy.
Why Colonel Custer? Why what does the narrative, let's forget the director, anybody who wrote it, right? Let's just look at it as a piece of art here. What is the narrative saying about Katsumoto's affinity with Colonel Custer and Tom Cruise's eventual like, I empathize with what you're saying too. What is it that he finally sees at the end? Because it's clearly not that he is in favor of Custer.
Yeah.
You know, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, great question, great point. So that's a really peculiar part of the movie, a very thought-provoking part of the movie. So you have historically you have, you know, Custer's last stand, you know, Wounded Knee, where it's like Custer and like 200 soldiers, and they have the hubris to try and fight off, you know, this is like 2,000, you know, Native American soldiers, right? So like,
right.
And that's the thing, right? And that's the thing. And Tom Cruise's character is saying like that was hubris. That was Custer like falling into the own legend of himself that he created, because that's what he was. I mean, if Custer were around in the 21st century, he'd be an Instagram influencer. He was that kind of guy, you know, like really, really into self-promoting and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So Tom Cruise says, no, that was pure ego. That was a disgusting action, and he, you know, resulted in the loss of lives. That was disgusting. And then Katsumoto, the chief of the samurai, he hears that story and says, like, no, that's impressive. That's deeply impressive to, you know, to be holding down the fort when you have like 200 men versus thousands of men, right? Kind of like the 300 story from like ancient times, you know, the 300 Greek warriors versus the 100,000 Persians. And there's a sense of honor in it, right?
Right.
So what that actually made me think of, there's a Zen teacher whose book I read, and he points out, and this is a very similar thing. He says, okay, he gives two quotes, which are pretty much the same quote. The first quote is, I am the one, I am the all, the world begins and ends with me, right? And then he gives a second quote, which is pretty much the same. I am the universal one, I am here, I am all, right? And then he says, the first quote is from Hitler, right? And then the second quote is from the Buddha. So what's going on with that, right? Because we can assume, you know, based on the stories, whatever, historically, I mean, you know, even if you don't think, you know, the Buddha was historical, which he very well might not have been, or even if you think like whatever, he was a cult leader or something, the fact is he didn't, you know, murder 6 million people. So like, how do you take those two statements, one from Hitler, one from the Buddha, the same statement, and what's the difference? You know, how do you take, you know, freaking Custer, Last Stand, and then Katsumoto, the super honorable samurai in the context of the movie, who are doing the same thing, but then one's coming from a place of deep ego and self-obsession, right? And then the other is coming from a place of the universe speaks through me, I am one with the universe, that kind of thing, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I'll throw it back to you. I mean, do you see a difference there? Was Custer actually brave? Is that the point? Or is Katsumoto a little bit deluded? Or can the same action say two different things based on how it's done and who's doing it?
Right. I like your point. I think I don't know if this will fully make sense, but it reminds me of a process of intertextuality, where you're taking one book and sort of relating it to one story and relating it to another story and relating it to another story, right? But the details of each story are different. Intentions can be different, all this stuff, right? But there's intertextuality between them. So the intertextuality here could be, you know, the bravery of Leonidas and the Spartans, and the bravery of you know, Katsumoto, and the bravery of Custer, the wildness to like stand for a cause that you believe in, whether that cause be good or bad.
Yeah.
And in this case, for our narrative, the cause is good.
Yeah.
Then at that point, you know, it's something entirely different, you know, especially if you know, don't consider the full context. But they do, though. They address it. And what does Tom Cruise say? He says, freaking, you know, he fell in love with his ego and his soldiers died for it. You know, freaking, I like this, Colonel Custer. Freaking, you know, but really what it was this sort of, you know, like you're saying, two things meaning the same thing at once. You know, in one instance, it's, you know, it was terrible what Custer did, you know, not only for his soldiers, but of course for the Native Americans, most importantly. And you know, that his army did kill, you know, even though they were, you know, beat brutally. but just before that battle with Custer where he died, there was like the Red Rose River or something like that, and man, that was a brutal battle. That all being said, I think I'd lean on the narrative is trying to tell us that, you know, uh it's something that means two different things, right? Because there's no way the narrative is trying to tell us that, oh, at the end of
Right.
the movie, Katsumoto and freaking
Yeah.
Tom Cruise are both like fans of fucking, you know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like the
genocide
movie's
of
actually
Native
like a
Americans.
defensive
Like, yeah,
costume.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly. And I think it's about the cause. You know, you mentioned the cause, right? Because it's like, because the whole way it's presented is like the cause that Custer was fighting for was like himself, celebration of ego, you know, his own
Right,
inflated sense
right.
of who he was. That was the cause of the battle. Whereas like,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
Leonidas, freaking Greeks or like or Katsumoto, Tom Christ and the samurais, that like
Right,
that was the cause was honorable. It was a cause for the preservation of a way of life, you know, the preservation of people. It was the low techs, you know, standing up against the powers that be in order to preserve their humanistic ways of life. Um,
right.
Even if they were destined to fail, which they were, you know, I mean, when was the last time you saw a samurai walking around, right? But like, even though they were destined to fail, there was still some great, deep humanistic honor in it, and that's different from Custer, who was just self obsessed.
Right,
And the
right.
Hitler quote and the Buddha quote, if same thing, you know, historical context, Hitler was literally murdering millions of people trying to take over the world. And the Buddha was just kind of like walking around in the woods, like chatting with people who came his way, you know? So,
Right, right.
you know, context
So
matters.
me and my class, we watched this Bourdain. I can't think of the country right now. It's in the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they interview this British dude who was a British Marine, and he fought in a war against the Sultan back in the 80s or in the 70s, right?
Whoa, weird. Yeah.
And the Sultan wanted to keep the country traditional. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't want technology. He didn't want to sell the oil. He didn't want to have Facebook, anything like that. You know, he wanted to keep traditional. So they're interviewing this guy, and this guy said, "Well, we fought with the new South for the new Sultan, and boom, they won, and they had been selling their oil, and you know they have schools and hospitals and all this stuff, but now their oil reserves are almost gone, and blah blah blah." But there's this dichotomy I was telling about my class, this philosophical question, and I think the Last Samurai poses this as well. Is it okay, or is it better to stay in the natural, traditional world? Or is it better to sell the oil and build hospitals and schools and all this, but you then get the commerce and the technology and the Facebook and all this different stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Same with Japan, right? Where you know, we are wearing Western clothes, freaking, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
emperor there, and he's losing his power, and like, you know, have we forgot ourselves though? But again, what's the answer? Was it good that
Yeah.
Japan is now, you know, a wealthy country? Or would it have been better for Japan to stay poor and village and rice? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the answer there? I don't know. You know, clearly Tom Christ and Katsumoto were fighting for the traditional, but
Right.
you know, I was saying in the Bourdain and that British soldier, maybe the traditional isn't something that should be fought for.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. 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 I have a lot of thoughts. I don't think I have an answer for this one, but I have thoughts.
Yeah.
So, God, I guess my mind goes a couple places, but I'll start with Dr. Patrick, who I worked with.
Nice.
Yeah, that dude was amazing, such a good dude. And like, so
Patty.
his story, he grew up, huh?
Patty.
Patty, Dr. Patty. So he grew up in Cameroon, country in Africa, right?
Yeah.
And he grows up poor, you know. I mean, like he told me that there were times where it was like, oh shit, where's our food coming from this week, right? So it was like, you know, some serious poverty essentially. Um, whatever, he made it. Him and his siblings are all healthy adults, you know. His parents are around, you know. He made it, whatever. And he's one of the happiest people I've ever met. He's just got this light about him, you know. He's like a healthy dude, family man, villager, just like a really good, sweet person, compassionate. Just I can't speak highly enough of this guy. He's just a really good dude, right? Cares about the people around him. And he told me, he said that he was getting sick of America. He's been here for like a decade or something, maybe more. But he goes, he's getting sick of America because he goes, look, man, like everyone has so much. He goes, like, there's more shit here than I could have dreamed of growing up in Cameroon. He goes, however, he goes, people in Cameroon, and he goes, this isn't like romanticization. He goes, I'm fucking from there. I go back to visit, you know, whatever. He goes, people there are just happier in like a more human way. He's like, yeah, you know, it's life, things happen, whatever. He goes, sometimes it gets a little dicey with money, whatever. But he's like, but he goes, there's just this like basic level of humanism that doesn't seem to exist in the US. You know, there's this constant, like, our sense of self-worth is so fucked up. It's all wrapped up in productivity and all this stuff. You know, he goes, just people are happier in Cameroon, right?
Right.
And you know, I can already hear, you know, some people I know who would be like, well, why doesn't he go back then? You know? And it's like, you know, he's got his freaking kids here. His wife's family is, you know, there's commitments, you know, it's like, you know, he doesn't want to leave his kids, or, you know, they're in high school. He's not just going to be like, let's go to Cameroon, guys, you know?
Sure.
So, you know, there's people have their commitments. It's not as easy as just like, we'll go back. But anyway, like, so that comes to mind, you know, I mean, so I don't know. And is it dichotomous though? Can we have, you know, a lot of material wealth and comfort and not lose our soul? You know, it sounds like, you know, the question is, throw it back to our boy Jesus, you know, it's like, gain the world, but lose your soul.
Right.
Is it a dichotomy? Can we actually gain the world, you know, material well-being and comfort, and our souls too? You know, does it have to be one or the other?
There's also that parable about, like, you know,
love Jesus,
about the camel, you know, going through the needle of the eye or whatever.
Oh, that one's hilarious. Yeah, it's easier.
That being said, he didn't say it was impossible. However, there's got to be some sort of dichotomy there. We could find a middle. I think we're doing that. That's what this one of the goals of galacticism, you know,
right?
Is finding that peace, you know, in a technological world. Where is the technological farm? Where's the new samurai village? Yeah, exactly. You know, and man, I like we were also saying that my dog, if he is a human, Hagrid would be the reporter, you know, the journalist in the movie, Mr. Grid.
So, British dude.
If you hear Mr.
Capital.
Oh, capital. I never quite understood the scalping. Love that dude, Mr. Grid, you know. His little digression there at the end though gets me, is, you know, some people say Captain Algren died of his wounds or maybe went back home, but I'd like to think that he found a little bit of peace that we all seek, you know, and it's him walking back to the village on a sunset, Brother Dusk.
Yeah.
And that movie, man, is just, I think all millennials should watch that movie, because if we want to look at it as not from a racial lens, not from political lens, not from war or anything, let's look at it as just a psychosocial, you know, experiment in a life. Like you're saying, man, Thomas Christ, this is a playbook for all of us depressed millennials and Gen Zers and Xers.
The playbook, baby. Yeah.
that we can return to the village. We can stop, Saké drinking and freaking, our stupid job with our worst boss ever, who's telling us to roll up on a freaking village, some of the, metaphorical just freaking things we're not even happy about, whatever,
Right.
even perhaps even morally against in payroll or something like that, Fuck it, live simply, Katsumoto, get back out there and just clean up your life and
Yeah.
fucking, you can start practicing swords and playing baseball out in the find some beautiful wife too. Sure, you might have killed her husband, but you're getting to her.
Yeah, and I think that's why this movie speaks. I mean, it was a very popular movie when it came out. I mean, I think
Right.
it speaks to just the general sort of like malaise that we feel in this country of just like America's harsh, bro.
Right. I think it's a way to get back onto the right life thread.
Yeah.
Did you find the Irishman? It's interesting. I was just thinking now. He's sort of a double of Tom in a way,
Mhm.
because he came to America, and Irish dude fell in love with American culture, and then joined the union and freaking yeah. You bastards! I'll kick everyone last one of you. Freaking love that guy.
He's a cool guy.
That would be a wild story. Is the person who comes, falls in love with American culture, becomes a soldier, whatever the heck.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Some Russian dude.
Yeah, I mean and that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell that story from another angle, and you could. I mean, so many people, came to America or still coming to America thinking they're going to find the
Right.
village. That's just some advertising, though. You're not going to find it here. But
It's also crazy that that's the story of The Last Samurai is based on a true story. It was based on a real
Dances with Wolves too. Yeah, I mean, these are actual
right. These are
that's the
true
thing
stories.
too. I think
There's
when you
pictures
take
of the white dude in his armor.
when you take the
and it's not just white people either. Like you're saying, there's the story of the Black Samurai and
the African who made his way up to Japan. But yeah, and I mean that's the thing about all these kind of like I don't know, more liberal narratives of things and critiques of movies and things like that. I mean, they're true in one lens, but then they have a lot of limitations too, because it's like, no, fucking historically that happened. It's like, it just did, so it's like, can we watch, Last Samurai and be like, oh, that movie's white centric and white racist and shit. It happened, it historically, as weird as this sounds, it's a historically accurate movie, right?
Right, exactly. And why would we hate that dude? Like, he's the most liberal of us all, freaking fighting for the samurai, Yeah, exactly. And it would be undergraduate reading to just be like, oh, white freaking colonizer, whatever, ruining it. It's like, nah. They were learning about each other's cultures. He learned the language. There's scenes about, not only did he learn the language, he learned like the games that they played.
Well, and that's what the movie does well too. It's not him coming in and, it's not a story where, Tom Christ comes into Japan and then like teaches all the dumb village idiots about American civilization, and then they finally figure out how to live well. That's not the story. It's about him going in and letting go of his culture in order to learn more about another, which is pretty cool,
Yeah, and it's not white centric where it's about Tom Cruise going into the village and being like, I tell you what, that sushi looks pretty good.
Right.
Getting taken advantage, and just like, like you're saying,
He's a good dude.
it's about a person who's deeply damaged. You
Yeah.
know, his soul is, he's a very empathetic human being, and he finds himself. It's a beautiful story, whatever
It's a
the
story
race
of
is.
healing. Yeah, it's a story of healing. It's a story
right.
of cultural exchange, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the dude was basically suicidal out there in the front lines, you know, before
Yeah,
he went to the village, you know, in
Yeah.
Katsumoto,
Bro,
and yeah,
you are right though. I mean, about like it actually is a good formula for happiness. Maybe not the you know,
right,
dying in a battle part, but like
sure, sure,
it actually is a good formula for happiness, because look at what Tom Cruise comes into. Because that's the thing, dude. It starts off with him like he essentially has an amazing career, right? He has this Medal of Honor, and he's capitalizing on it by like doing this like lecture circuit and kind of turning his shit into a circus in order to make some money off it.
right,
He was an Instagram influencer in America, right?
right,
And then all that falls apart, and then he goes, and what's he find? He finds a healthy, slow courtship with this woman in Japan, right? He
right.
finds like a couple of really close friends. You know, he's hanging out with Katsumoto and like the other dude, and like playing swords, you know, battles, and like which is good. So he's getting exercise. He has like a strong social network. You know, he has romantic connection. Um, I mean that's you know, he's got like hobbies. He's got like artistic hobbies, like learning calligraphy and shit and language. I mean,
Oh, right, right, yes,
he's literally got everything that we all want. You know, again, romantic relationships, strong social bonds and connections,
right,
physical outlets and creative outlets.
right.
What
And he has a goal, you know, the
and he has a goal.
project for
He's
the
working
man,
towards
and
something. He's
yeah,
building something. He cares about the people around him.
right.
It's a
And
good
there,
formula, you know.
God, it's a great formula. You know, he's
Yeah.
sober over there. He's got his glorious long hair. He grew out his hair. He's freaking
Grew out his hair, looks good.
guy's wearing dope clothes. Like, you
Yeah.
know, he's comfortable. Like you're saying, friendships, love.
Yeah.
And I think all of
And he
us,
worked off his trauma by screaming Saki in
he
the middle
worked
of the
off
night.
his
He
trauma.
went through
Yeah.
his you know, he did his therapy session. He like
Right, right. It's
he
not
went
gonna
through the
be,
dark night of the soul, bro.
dude, Tom Cruise was the buffalo, you know, and
Tom
brother
Cruise was the buffalo.
Don. He had
Yeah.
to face the storm, and
Yes.
Saké.
Sake.
I'll kill ya.
That was him
And
facing the storm. Yeah. Buffalo
yeah,
Storm, Tom Cruise.
but then you'll wake up. There'll be some old dude waiting for you outside to go for a walk. You can joke with him. Freaking,
Yeah.
You a ladies' man, Tom.
Sake. Man.
Yeah, great formula. Fucking great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Dion said he saw something on Reddit that was like 18 pages long about like why The Last Samurai is such a great movie, like all these different bits.
That's really funny.
But it just is, all the acting is really good. The
Yeah,
storytelling, the dialogue, everything is like extremely spot on. It's emotional, it's moving. You actually care. Like, dude, when Katsumoto's son gets gunned down, so sad.
So sad.
Or when they cut his hair, you know.
Oh man.
Yeah. Freaking, oh man, devastating, you know. And this stuff happened in history, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of the narrative of human beings emerging from cultures like that is not just, you know, native Japanese or Native Americans or brown dudes or whatever. It was everybody. It was white dudes and black dudes and brown women and everybody seeing that, hey, this is wrong, you know.
Right.
Freaking Katsumoto, K-Dog. I love that guy. Freaking, we're homies. Like, what are you doing?
J-Bone. Oh, he was the J-Bone of the movie.
He was K-Bone.
He was J-Bone. Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, here's a question. So one thing I noticed in the movie, or that made me notice historically. So, okay, so I think a lot about like cultural erasure, which is a thing that just has been happening for a long time. And the way that I was thinking of it, I was thinking, you know, past couple generations, you know, depending on when a family comes to the US. But like, so I'm thinking, okay, on my mom's side of the family, the Italian side, it was like
they came over from Italy, they speak Italian, and then they come here, they speak English. So they're bilingual. They're growing their own food, growing tomatoes and making their own sauce. Like all of my grandparents and great grandparents played music, freaking accordions, playing these like old Italian songs, whatever, right?
Right.
Played piano. And then just fast forward a couple of generations, and I don't speak Italian. I don't make my own food. I don't play music. I mean, I play some guitar, but that's because I essentially like taught myself YouTube videos, whatever. I didn't like, not saying they're playing like old Italian folk songs that are 1,000 years old.
Right.
So it's clear to me that the cultural erasure is happening, right? And then,
Sure.
that's a thing, right? And watching The Last Samurai, I go, oh shit, this isn't recent. This isn't like a phenomenon that started in the 1950s or something like that. I mean, this has been going on for like at least a couple of 100 years. The samurai dying out. There's so many cultural traditions, the warrior classes, musical traditions, so many things being lost, and not just in recent decades, but for the past probably up to 500 years. This process has been going on. What the fuck? What's going on with that? Why is this happening?
It's also wild, just to piggyback on that. Sorry, Jesus, but even religions have timelines.
Yeah.
We think back to, back when human beings believed in freaking literal magic and oracles and shit like that, and then there was Odin and all the the gods and mythology, and then there's now Christianity. It's been around for a long time, and now the single largest population in America is non-religious.
Right.
And you brought up a good point during the movie, even with Zen and stuff, just like people that practice Zen, even in Japan at these old temples, are mainly like white Euro,
They're Tom
people.
Cruises.
Like, they're Tom Cruises. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actual Japanese people are like, nah, those people are like crazy, like Mormons or like,
that's like weird. Yeah.
Scientologists or something,
it'd be like someone from Japan coming here and getting like, really deep into Mormonism. And we would be like, that's bizarre.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's Buddhism over there with us. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, man, I don't really know what my closing thoughts were on that, but yeah.
I don't know, but it's weird. There's something peculiar, like the last few hundred years, this like cultural erasure thing. I don't know. There's something like, I'm just like, what is this?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Like what's going on?
Yeah. The timeline, everything has a timeline, even culture,
Yeah.
Because there was a time in your bloodline where there was no banjo or there was no accordion as well. And then the accordion came in, stayed for 150 years. Now it's gone.
Right.
Guitar, if you have a kid, you might teach your kid the guitar. Right. He might be a little more bored with it than that, perhaps his kid, and then it's gone. Right. And I think a lot of these things happen. What's interesting is the cultural staples that do stay forever. And you can find this in, even food by chance or certain ideologies and moralities. And that's what that movie's also trying to do as well, is illuminate the like beauty of old cultures from the past,
Yeah.
And when he tells him, what does he tell? Oh yeah, what could be so necessary, right? The way of the samurai, what could be so necessary right now, when he says it's not necessary anymore. Katsumoto, about to.
Oh, like, right. Yeah.
A life of order and detail and commitment should be celebrated, not, shame, something to be ashamed of.
Right.
And that's something too to think about as well, especially our culture. Like, we're not very like, I don't think like disciplined and detail oriented with a lot of things we do in our lives anymore. And that causes chaos, and it causes anxiety and depression and,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a great scene. Yeah. That whole line, like, cause that's the thing. The argument was like, well, the samurai are obsolete. They're not necessary anymore. And then like you're saying, well, the line was, what could be more necessary? right now than preserving this culture as it dies, as it becomes obsolete. And yeah, and that feels so true right now because it's like, I mean, we could, this is real, this is true. I mean, people do it. We could very easily live our lives not leaving a single room.
Right.
We
Right.
can get our groceries delivered. We can work remotely. We can freaking look at pornography. We can whatever, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
you could like just lock yourself in a fucking room and not leave. And
Right.
that's what they want. That's what Amazon fucking wants you to do. That's profitable for them, right? I mean,
Sure.
and that's what they want. So, making art, going out into the world. I mean, all of our fucking buildings are built, whatever. It's like our cities are there. Like, what's the point of making art? There's all these artistic traditions, like historical shit. Like, there's so much fucking art on the internet. What do I gotta waste my time drawing pictures for? Right?
Right.
I mean, it's obsolete. What the hell? Who cares?
Right.
Painting's like an old writing. Dude, being a writer, that's no one fucking, everyone's becoming illiterate. Writing's obsolete, bro. If you want to reach people, you don't write.
Right.
So it's like all of these things are obsolete, but what could possibly be more necessary now than to
Yes.
maintain, the human spirit as it's
Right.
dying, to keep
Yeah.
the lights on as it's dying.
Right. Right. And, back to like the historical reading too, the 90s are a little loosey goosey there. And then we had the trauma of 9/11, this and that. Like, I think we didn't know who we were anymore. America was brother Dawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we needed to go through that metaphorical sake moment, where we're sweating and getting the toxins out and then
Yes.
reawaken to a village and
Yeah.
reawaken to a purpose, to a life of that we care about. That's essentially what Tom Christ is saying.
Yeah.
You cared about your life.
Mm-hmm.
You put effort into it, detail, um, and that a life like that should be celebrated. It's not something that you'll ever get shame from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was also a playbook for the future of America too. Is I think even still now post COVID, this movie is that much more important. It's come back,
Mm-hmm.
because what could be more necessary than the
Right.
last samurai village?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Final thoughts?
The last thing, the question of tradition or assimilation into modern culture or whatever. I wanted to get this out before, but then chose to go the Dr. Patrick route.
Okay.
But this is still an interesting story. But years ago, like 10 years ago, because I was an undergraduate, I remember reading this story about like some mining company like coming into Peru and wanting to like, cut the fucking tops off these mountains, right? And, mine whatever minerals, all that.
Right.
And then all of these village people were like, those mountains are literally our gods. Like that's there's all these mythology traditions, story traditions, tens of thousands of years old of tradition around these mountains, right? And this fucking mining company is just like gonna destroy them for a few bucks, essentially, right?
Right.
And then it was essentially that conversation, okay, tradition versus wealth, right? Because then
Right.
the company and the people who were in support of it were saying, well, look, this is like a poverty stricken city. Or not even a city, it was like a town, as a village. This is a poverty stricken village. Like, look, these people can't fucking afford dentistry. Like, we're going to be bringing jobs in. This is actually going to be like, really healthy and vitalizing for these individuals, right?
Right.
Which on one hand, it's like you're an outsider coming in telling people what's good for them, which is just not okay, right?
Right.
Like let them decide for themselves, obviously, but then it was just this extended conversation of, yeah, is it tradition or is it comfort and wealth, right? And then the other side of it though is the historical context, which is okay, this group of people were living in poverty, but why were they living in poverty?
Right.
you know, because this was like a group of people who would have been thriving 1,000 years ago, freaking farming the land, having clean access to clean water, right?
Right.
And then it
Right.
was through industrialization that they could no longer healthily farm the land, no longer have access to clean water. Their teeth
Yes.
freaking started falling out. So it was through that process of industrialization that they started to fall into poverty. And then this company comes in and is like, no, no, if you industrialize further, that's actually going to help you. We're going to build you a school. And they're like, no, you're the same guys who fucked us in the first place. Like, and now you want to
Right.
cut the tops off our mountains,
Right. Right.
you know? So I think there's a lot of historical context there too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and clearly even in the movie, you know, the narrative, Colonel Bagley and freaking Badgley or whatever, those guys are dicks, you know, and
Right.
the Japanese dude too, freaking, oh man, the worst, you know. So was the samurai culture doomed, you know, or was it made extinct through a more predatory, you know, yet toxic culture, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's another thing that's another main factor of theme of that movie as well, you know.
Right.
So you know, it bodes that question as to, back to that question of even the Bourdain thing too, is the step into the future the right direction always, right?
Right. Right.
Or is it only going in that direction because, you know, a toxic being is leading us there?
Yes.
And actually the smell is a lot more foul that way, but we're being drawn that way anyways because of stupid Colonel Bagley, you know? So,
Yes. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man.
And then I think that, just a little final thought, I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's really commenting on the war too at the time because, you know, that movie is about, you know, dropping this sort of patriotic blind faith Americana and seeing another culture for who they are, appreciating them, and, you know, thinking, oh, I'm going to know my enemy, when you realize, get to know a human, right? And then going back to Dr. Patty, you know, you Obama says in this other episode of Bourdain, he says, we don't make peace with our friends, we make peace with our enemies. And you know, that's a lot what that movie is about. And again, that's another reason why it's so important right now, because we have that discord in our society right now. You know, we need to start understand each other. We need to visit each other's villages and you know, kick the sake for a few months and you know, find our brother day, or really become our brother dusk, you know.
On behalf of the Jareds, thank you for listening. Follow, tell your friends, and leave a comment. The Jays will be back next week, and always remember, the perfect blossom is a rare thing. You could spend your life looking for one, and it would not be a wasted life. Have a good night.